So my name is RahK Lash. My pronouns are he, him, director in the Center for Ideas, as well as director for the MLK Scholar Program. Shout out to the organizers. Thank you, Roz, and shout out to everybody working behind the scenes to make this happen. And shout out to everybody that's tuned in and is rocking with us tonight. So at this point in the semester and this point in the day, I looked outside. I was about to say good afternoon, but I don't know if this is the same daylight savings time I grew up with. But at this point in the day, I have about 2 brain cells left, as I tell my students, and they are twerking at me in the corner. So I could put some notes down. I'm going to read off some bullets just with some initial thoughts. And as my co-panelists were talking, I took a few notes, just a few thoughts to put out there and respond to. And hopefully you joining us, can think about these things as well, and even jot down some of your initial reactions. So first, we're calling this a post-election panel. But for me, I would argue that we're still in election season and that we're going to continue to be in election season up until the inauguration, right? Trump's Twitter feed doesn't dictate an election, but, it's still going to have an impact, right? Even when we think about how strategically the Trump administration is keeping people from being able to do what they need to do and get started. So that first 100 days that we tend to focus on for a president is really going to be a game of catch up, right? And we think about all the folks that are going to hurt as a result of that. Maya Angelou, one of my favorite quotes, says, when someone shows you who they are, you must believe them. When I look at the maps, whether it was, on November 3rd, whether it's, everything, the whole season it took us where we didn't get much sleep. I don't know about you, but that was a very anxious week where I kept waking up, checking my phone every 5 minutes. But when I looked at the breakdown of the states and had conversations with my friends and individual networks, we talked about, should it be this close? And we said, that's not necessarily the right question. This is the reality that we live in. And there's a conversation about what should be and a conversation about what is. And we have to hold both of those truths in the same state. So when I look at the states broken down and how people voted, I believe folks, right? And I think that we must believe folks for who they've shown us and told us that they are time and time again. And I encourage folks to ask more questions. When you look at those numbers, when you look at, the breakdowns, ask yourself, what's missing? What don't I know about this? Project Look Sharp is a resource from Ithaca College. And I teach a 3-credit MLK seminar for my MLK scholars on the civil rights movement. And so we just talked about media literacy specifically within this, looking at the civil rights movement. And so I encourage everybody to utilize that. There are infographics, there are, pre-made workshops and different things, but teaching students how to ask those questions when things are presented to them. What's missing, right? What does this person want me to know? What other questions do I have? What information do I need to continue to infer? So when we think about, the increased Black voters, or Trump picked up more Black voters than he did in 2016, what questions pop up, right? What's missing from the information that we have? When we think about, how we talk about communities and how we talk about Latino votes and the increase in Asian American votes, and what other questions should be popping up for us as citizens and as folks, spectators watching this and holding these conversations, because numbers don't lie, but they can tell any story that we want them to tell, right? And I'm gonna say that one more time, numbers don't lie, but they can tell any story we want them to tell. Now, in the same course that I teach, I have 12 dynamic, powerful, amazing students, MLK scholars. If you are watching, I love y'all. For my first year students, all of y'all. But for that first year class, these were 12 students that voted for the first time. And my class meets on Tuesday and Thursday. And so on that Tuesday, at 4 o'clock, I was just asking folks, how's it going? And a lot of them began to tell that same story. And I myself forgot, right, just being removed from age, that this was a historical event for these individuals, for our Ithaca College students, for that incoming class, talking about stories of going to the polls with their family and their friends and their support networks, and being a part of that, but also to demonstrate that our youth in our country are not just showing up to demonstrate and protest in the streets like they have been since May, June, and even before that, as they were involved in high school, but they're also showing up through the ballot. Right. And I think that's something powerful to talk about Gen Z and talk about our incoming class of students, where they're putting their action. What makes me a little uncomfortable moving forward, as Dr. Horsley kind of talked about the civil rights, Our country has a long history of interposition and nullification, right? Coming off the Civil War, going into Jim Crow, the interpositioning and the nullification of federal legislation coming down. And so I'm thinking about the most vulnerable populations that have been vulnerable, right, for 4 years, have been vulnerable since the start of the outbreak of this pandemic, and thinking about the plan that the Biden-Harris campaign is rolling out, and looking at that map, right, I fear what's going to happen in the year ahead of us. I fear the pushback. I fear the stalling. I fear, who's going to get hurt as a result of the nullification and interpositioning. And it feels like history is humming kind of the same song on repeat, and it's Groundhog's Day. Or if you're a Marvel fan, when Doctor Strange went to bargain with Dormammu and got stuck in that time loop over and over again, that's what I feel like is happening. And so those are just some initial thoughts. And my last, before I give it back, just as some of the other panelists have talked, I heard white supremacy dwindling, and I just want to introduce some different language and say maybe the sophistication of white supremacy. Dr. Carol McKinstry, who was a secretary in the church of the 16th Street Baptist Church in 1963, where 4 little girls were bombed and killed, she taught me that James Crow, Jim Crow has really just evolved to become Dr. James Crow Esquire. So I wouldn't say that, we can antiquate white supremacy dwindling by the numbers of who's showing up to a white supremacy million MAGA march. It's not necessarily what we see, but it's really more about what's felt and what's being structured on top of that power of white supremacy. Just want to introduce some new language and kind of curve that a little bit. And then as Stacey Abrams has taught us, what we saw with this election is not only the awareness that we would typically find about the right to vote, but we also found ourselves defending the right to vote, not just spreading that awareness, but defending that right to vote, right? Think about how many infographics, workshops, think about, all the preparation that was done leading up to the election. I heard the word apocalyptic calamity. And I think, Tom, you brought that to us. And I just wanted to add, a yes and. Apocalyptic calamities can crawl and creep. Just like the zombies on Walking Dead, they can crawl and creep just as fast as they can run, like the 28 days later zombies. And so I would break that down and ask, apocalyptic is going to mean different things for different folks, right? I think there's this weight and this pressure Dr. Horsley just talked about of what now. And I think the communities that have always had to sacrifice in the name of unity for others in this country are the ones that are feeling that the most, always sacrificing for unity and never really getting freedom, right? And those are some of the ideals that this country has been built on. And it was Dr. Horsley that asked me this summer, she sent me a resource. And I don't know if it was in, just her signature or if it was a specific question to me, but I took it as a question to me talking about what does true liberation look like, right? What does freedom look like for you? And there's not a day that has gone by since July that I haven't thought about that. And so I want to introduce that to us moving forward in this world that we want to move forward with in a Biden-Harris administration. What does freedom look like? Because I'm not sure that we can continue down the road of unity. And I'm going to pass it back.